Today on the Murder, She Wrote podcast, we will solve the mystery of why Jessica doesn't like to drive. We're back in Cabot Cove. Hello and welcome to the Murder, She Wrote podcast, where I watch every single episode of the hit 80s/90s show Murder, She Wrote, starring 3-time Academy Award nominee and 5-time Tony winner Angela Lansbury. Today we're going to be talking about Season 1, Episode 8. Hit, Run, and Homicide. Air date November 25th, 1984. Alright, we're back in Cabot Cove with this episode, so we get to see Tom Bosley again as Sheriff Tupper, and we also get to see Clyde Atkins as Ethan. No, Seth Hazlitt hasn't made an appearance yet. We're getting there though, folks, I promise. Alright, so this episode starts off with the opening credits playing over the ocean crashing against rocks. Like, that's a theme in Season 1. After the opening credits, we have an aerial shot of Mrs. Fletcher riding through town on her bicycle. She runs into Daniel O'Brien, who's looking down at a device he's invented that basically tells you how many miles you've walked, how many miles you've ridden your bike, your blood pressure and heart rate, and all of that. So basically, this episode was ahead of its time because now we had the Fitbit, which is on your wrist, like a watch. My mother has one. And one of my best friends, Jennifer, has one. So, episode was ahead of its time. Jessica is kind of concerned. It's Founders Day, and she has to do a speech about the Founding Fathers, and apparently they're not so great. One was a pirate, and the other one fought on the side of the British in the War of 1812. But it doesn't matter, she doesn't end up giving her speech anyway. They're all at the picnic for Founders Day when suddenly a man comes running down the street towards the park, and he's being chased by a station wagon. Someone is trying to run him down. He runs through the park, the station wagon plows through the fence, and then he runs through the baseball field and is able to get to the fence before the car finally does in fact hit him. And we, as the audience, realize that no one is driving this car. Sheriff Tupper, played by Tom Bosley from Happy Days, comes in and interviews people, and basically Ethan tells him no one was driving that car. I swear to it on everything. And here's one gigantic plot hole. When the car hits this guy that is running at the start of it, the car stops when it hits the fence. It doesn't back up and go away or anything. It just sort of stays there. So they can pretty much see that, everyone can pretty much see that no one is driving this car. Now, if the car is there when Sheriff Tupper shows up, I don't think so, but still, you would think that everyone would have saw that no one was in the car when it stopped. Anyway, Sheriff Tupper does not believe Ethan at all. He's very skeptical in the early episodes before he allows Mrs. Fletcher to help him solve the crimes. Various things that come up in Cabot Cove. So Ethan goes to Mrs. Fletcher's house the next day, says that Sheriff Tupper is in way over his head, and that she basically needs to help him. And he agrees. She agrees. She goes on her bike up to Sheriff Tupper and she basically talks to him about the case and makes it seem as if it's his idea to invite her along to interview the man that was hit. The man that was hit is named Mr. Woodley. He apparently claims that he was asked down here by Mr. O'Brien, who we met at the start of the episode. Mr. Woodley is played by Stuart Weinman, a character actor. He's known for a John Wayne film called The Commandos, The Longest Day, Night of the Lupus, and The Story of Ruth. He died this year on March 16th, 2020 at the age of 92. The last known credit, he was in 189 different things, is The President's Men, a TV movie in 2000. This is not his only episode of Murder, She Wrote. He'll appear in a handful of others. He was in the original Knots Landing. He was in a Daniel Steele movie, Steel Watch, I think that was a Daniel Steele movie. Tales from the Dark Side, Fantasy Island. Just a lot of good stuff. He had a really long career. May you rest in peace, Mr. Weidman. He basically tells Sheriff Tupper that he is there because of Mr. O'Brien and that no one was driving the car. He didn't get hurt. He just sort of sprained his ankle and he has to have it in traction. So he's not a very happy person. So Sheriff Tupper Jessica decides to go to Daniel's house and tell him that that Mr. Woodley that he invited here has been hurt by a car. Well, when she tells him this, he's like, I didn't invite him here. I didn't make that call. I don't like him. He apparently worked for a company and he was in it was for the money, Mr. Woodley was, and Daniel was in it to help people. And we get introduced to his assistant, Katie, played by Jane Allison. She passed away in 2006 at the age of 88. She's known for Executive Suite, The Three Musketeers 1948, The Opposite Sex, and Good News. She was in 74 different things. Her last known credit is These Old Broads. Oh, one of my favorite movies. An uncredited role as a lady in the hotel. She was in The Love Boat, Simon and Simon, The Incredible Hawk, The Dick Powell Theater Show, and a lot of movies for MGM. So she had quite the career, and this is her only episode that she appears in of Murder, She Wrote. We also get introduced to his son, Tony, played by Edward Abbott. I don't know if he's related to the other Abbotts, but he tragically died in 2006 as well, at the age of 55. He's known for Butterflies Are Free with Goldie Hawn, Galaxy of Terror, Midway, and the Dominic Principle. He was in 130 different things. The last known thing is from 2008. I guess he completed that before his death. Called a short called Bullets and Butterflies. He was also in Power Rangers Time Force. Um, okay. The soap opera Port Charles. I used to like that show. Sabrina the Teenage Witch. Um, Extreme Ghostbusters, the cartoon series. Spider-Man, the animated series. Fantastic Four, the animated series. Dr. Quinn. Medicine Woman. L.A. Law. In the Heat of the Night. Silk Stockings. Beauty and the Beast. Falcon Crest. And this is his only episode of Murder, She Wrote, so he had quite the career. We also get introduced to his fiancée, Leslie, played by Patty D'Armaville. I know I said that wrong, and I'm so sorry. She is still alive. She's known for Morning Glory, The Fan, Modern Problems, and the television show Third Watch. She's been in 74 different things. Her latest credit is the show Billions, where she plays Axel's mother. She was in Rescue Me, Law & Order Criminal Intent, Third Watch, like I said, The Sopranos, Guiding Light, New York Undercover, I don't know what that is. Oh, I Know What You Did Last Summer, love that movie. My So-Called Life, South Beach, Wise Guy, and this is her only episode of Murder, She Wrote. She also appeared in Charlie's Angels, so she's doing good. You go, Patty. Basically, Daniel is an inventor, and he invents all kinds of different things. And he's always inventing something new. He even invents a contraption where the birds are supposed to go in the trees or not go in the trees, but it ends up having all the dogs show up. Tony seems very happy with Leslie, and the next day, Mr. Woodley's partner arrives and that same station wagon runs him down. Mrs. Fletcher, of course, thinks that the two are related, but Sheriff Tupper says no. She's like, you seriously don't think that it's related, that one guy almost gets run down and the other guy does get run down? She decides to go look at a stretch of farmland that's been abandoned for years that would be perfect to hide a car. And Sheriff Tupper says, go ahead, you're more than welcome to do it. Just come back and tell me when you don't find anything. That night, she decides to make dinner for both Daniel, Katie, Tony, and Leslie, and tells them what she's going to do the next day. And the next day, she decides to do it. She goes to the stretch of farmland, and sure enough, she finds the car. And for some reason, I don't know why, she gets in it. And there's a person there waiting for her. They have a device that can control the car, like a remote control, for the car, kind of like those remote control cars we used to have when we were kids. As soon as Jessica gets in the car, it locks behind her and starts driving, and she has no control over it. She drives through town. Ethan sees her. He turns around, goes after her to try to help her, and they end up driving her through this place that has like a lighthouse. I guess it's a museum or something. I'm not sure exactly what it is. And just short of going over the cliff into the raging ocean below, the person who's controlling the car stops the car and drives away in this weird looking van that kind of looks like the van from Friday the 13th Part 3. And when Ethan goes up to the car and opens the door, Jessica says, and you wonder why I don't drive a car. Mystery solved. That's why she drives her bike. Later that same day, she's driving her bike and Tony notices her on the side of the road. She has a flat tire on her bike, so he offers to give her a ride. They stop at a gas station and get gas, and Mrs. Fletcher needs a tissue to wipe her eye, her nose, or something, and she discovers the mileage on the car. This will play a significant role later. She then goes back to Brian's house Daniel's house, and she and Sheriff Tupper have discovered the plans for his device that he created for Mr. Woodley's company, where you don't have to drive the car. You just punch in your destination on the computer and the car will drive you there, which is something we have today. So this episode was way ahead of its time. Who knew? And since they find the plans in the back of the car, all arrows seem to point to Daniel, so he gets arrested. And Mrs. Fletcher is now more invested than ever to get to help and solve this crime. When they're in jail, Daniel's like, maybe I did do it and I just don't remember. Maybe I'm schizo or something. And Mrs. Fletcher says, no, Daniel, you're not. Later that same day, she goes to the local grocery store, and the woman checking out her groceries is like, oh, I knew that O'Brien was flimsy or something. I knew that he probably did this or something along those lines. And Mrs. Fletcher says, he's been here for years and he's such a nice man. And she goes, well, he's not from around here. He wasn't born here. And it's like, what does that have to do with it? Then she starts complaining about this arcade game that she has. And they hear a bunch of commotion coming from it. And we think it's kids, but it turns out to be Ethan playing it. So he tells Mrs. Fletcher that she probably won't be able to play it, so she decides to play it herself. And as she's playing it, she has an epiphany and realizes exactly who did what. So she then decides to reenact the accident at the start of the episode. And she invites Tony and Leslie to come along. So as they're talking, the car comes down the street and starts chasing after Mr. Woodley. Leslie immediately runs to the van that's sitting there to try to stop it, but the device is not in that car, in the van. It turns out that Leslie and Mr. Woodley were in cahoots all along. Mrs. Fletcher realized this because he was always 3 feet ahead of the car and was able to run away from it and was not severely injured. Basically, if Mr. Woodley killed his partner, he would inherit the business. And if they framed O'Brien for murder and made him look like he was crazy, then he would basically have the device that would put him over the top. They didn't really explain how Leslie was in on it, but unfortunately Tony and Leslie are no longer together. She gets arrested, as well as Mr. Woodley, for murder and attempted murder and fraud. It seems as if Katie and Daniel are on their way to becoming a couple. Poor Tony gets nothing. He just gets the short end of the stick. And at the end of the episode, Mrs. Fletcher and Ethan decide to compete in a tournament with the arcade game that they played at the grocery store. And that's the end of the episode. Unfortunately, this episode did not have a lot of twists and turns. It was very simple and to the point. The only thing that I wish is that they would have a different car, because there's nothing scary about a station wagon. And basically, you can outrun a station wagon. They don't really drive really fast. So, I'm not saying that it should be the car from Christine or the Mustang from Knight Rider, but it should have been like something, because it was just not all that intimidating. There's not a lot of guest stars in the episode, which I've told you about them. So this is kind of sort of a tame episode for season 1. I'm sorry this one is so short. I don't have a lot to say about this one. It's not one of my favorites. I'm hoping the next one will be a little bit better, and I will basically get that out as soon as I can. But, this episode was kind of short and to the point. Someone's always getting murdered in Cabot Cove, it seems. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for listening. I've just recently joined a Facebook group called Jessica Fletcher Murder, She Wrote, and they've started to really like my podcast and my numbers have gone up. So thank you. I hope that you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you in the next one. Happy crime solving!